consent agenda items. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read through those, and I would entertain a motion to approve those consent agendas.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion about any of these consent agenda items? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Chief of Learning update, Dr. Brian Schindler, please.
Okay, I will. You want to bring up the tableau? While she's bringing up a system here I want to show, I just want to give you an update real quick on our tutoring. So as you know, we've been using ABLE tutoring for our 6th grade students. We've identified students that are behind grade level, and ABLE tutoring has been helping us out with our 6th grade students. We're going to continue with that process. And just to remind you, that is a one-on-one tutoring, volunteer tutoring system that they're helping us with. In addition to that, we wanted to expand it, and so we are in the process of communicating with them to help support our 7th graders who we've identified as being below grade level. And we're gonna try it a little bit different. This system, we're going to use a paid tutoring system. And still going to continue to use the ABLE volunteers with our 6th graders, but with 7th graders, what we're going to try is using a paid system. Instead of being one-on-one, we will pair probably 4 students with a paid tutor, and we're looking at doing that first thing in the morning prior to school starting, and recruiting students who will be there 45-50 minutes prior to the school year, for the school day starting. We've identified roughly about, we think we would have roughly about 60 students per site at each middle school, so about 120 students with about 30 tutors, and we would do that 3 days a week. We have a couple incentives that we think might help to get our 7th graders there. We're working on that. Just want you to know that it's a system that we're working on, and we're getting very close. Brenda's working close with ABLE and see if they can identify those tutors for us, and we're getting very close to that. So we'll give you an update if we get that put together, but that's kind of what we have. Then we had tutors then for our 6th graders and 7th graders. Questions about that?
I have a quick question. So what do you do about kids who ride the bus? Because they're not there 45 minutes before school starts.
Correct. These would have to be students who can get there. I mean, right now, that would be the way it works, is we'd have to have students who could get there in some capacity. But again, the incentive piece that we're working on, we're not ready to talk about it yet, but we think that maybe the incentive piece might encourage parents to transport or the students if they were able to walk. So we're working on that.
Have we thought about having something in the afternoon so they could ride the activities bus home after tutoring?
Yes. That's what we're looking at. That is a possibility, and we could look at that. It would change our incentive piece, because our incentive piece is tied to the morning support for those students. But if that doesn't work out, certainly we can consider that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I would like to just share with you, we have, historically, we look at data, we're always looking at data, and historically we've had a system called Pulse, and Pulse was good at giving us lots of charts and graphs and overall data, and we used Pulse to look at things like achievement by school and grade, the attendance, the behavior issues, our behavior management. It was really good about showing us a lot of, if you will, 30,000 foot data, kind of what's going on across the district. The problem with Pulse was that when you wanted to create something, you wanted to modify something or create something unique for what a building needed, for example, it was challenging, it was difficult, and it took a lot of time. And so well over a year ago, Dawn's office began looking at a system that was a little more user-friendly and would provide us a little more detailed reports. We now use Tableau, and Tableau is also really well, if you bring up the JCPS metrics, Tableau is also really good about giving you overall view of your district. And this is a report here that Dr. Lithicum actually had asked for, and it's kind of like a dashboard screen, kind of gives you a big picture as to what happened a year ago, 2 years ago, what's going on now. We can compare years, so you can compare behavior events, you can compare suspensions, iReady data. If you scroll down, we've got attendance, we've got running records. And the nice thing about this overall is you can compare and monitor month by month. So in September, right now, where are we compared to last year and the year before, and are we making progress? So it's just a very good overall, kind of like what we would have had with Pulse. It's just kind of a good starting point. That's really what it is. And so we look at this one quite frequently in our superintendent's council meetings, just to see, are we making progress month by month. However, the goal of using Tableau was, as you're looking at this data and you say, well, gosh, in September, it looks like if our attendance is not as good or our discipline is up, what are we going to do about it? Well, this chart really doesn't help you a lot with what are you going to do about it when you have 18 sites and 9,000 students, and what are you going to do about it? So the nice thing about Tableau, if you'll go to the literacy side now, Dawn, and go to the proficiency level choice demographic.
Meaning the iReady.
In the iReady window, yes, it's the proficiency level choice. So here's how we have the ability to start drilling down with what are you going to do about it. So Dawn, if you'll go over to, let's do race and demographics instead. Right now it's IEP. So for example, this is a chart right here that shows by race how our students are performing on the iReady test. It shows who are 2 or more levels below, who's on grade level, who's advanced. That's what this chart shows you by race. And I know we've had conversations in the past. One of the things that we want to do is close the achievement gap. And one of those is by race. We want to ensure that we're providing good progress regardless of race. And so this is one way that we can chart it. And so what this would do for you is you can look up and see, all right, 2 years ago, where was the gap with the races that we have? What last year, where were the gaps? This year, where are the gaps? And so you have the ability to kind of navigate through this and identify, are we getting any better with closing achievement gaps among groups? So this one is race. You can also look by students who have IEPs, students who don't have IEPs. You can see that we have whether they're homeless. You can look at boys and girls. Those are on free and reduced lunch. Those that are not. It provides you the detail to begin looking at all of our subgroups and how are we doing across the district with reducing the gaps between the subgroups. So this gets us down a little bit closer. Dawn, if you will go to student overall assessment. This is the Board of Ed one you created. So then after you look at that data, you have to say, well, who are these students and in what schools are they at and what are we going to do about it? This one then would drill down even closer. If you look on the far left where it says student, we have, because this is a public meeting, we've blocked out all student names, but all of those A's that you see, those are specific children. Their names are underneath of those A's. So, for example, you can take this chart and you can go to the subject, which is reading. You can go to the school. You can pick just one school. So, for example, Dawn, go up and pick one school. Pick East or just any old school. Because right now it's showing the entire district. And then you can pick the grade. So let's pick second, third grade, something. Just pick one grade. And so here's an example of, if you're looking at your literacy scores and you want to start to narrow down where are the areas that we need to get better on, here's an example of the third grade teachers at Bel Air literally can see that, again, you don't see the names, but under those A's and B's, those are literally student names. So now a teacher can say, these are my 24 students. I can identify whether they are below, they're on grade level, or they're advanced. And then what they have the ability to do is get into the iReady system and say, I'm going to take student A, let's just say it's Johnny, I'm going to pull up Johnny's report and it'll show what Johnny can and cannot do in terms of literacy or in terms of math. They literally have the ability now to identify by student, here's what these students in my class struggle with, and here's what they do really well with. So you now have the ability to design instruction around, I know that this group of kids need this and this group of kids need this, because I believe that if we're ever going to close the gap, it isn't about you take students who are different and you give them a different education. It's about you meet kids where they're at, you meet their needs, you identify what it is that they need, and you provide that in their instruction. Whether they're students who are struggling or those students who are advanced, we have to provide instruction. So this is how we now have the ability to drill down to very specific children and impact the instruction that happens in the classroom, which is where we can make a difference, as opposed to sitting in a boardroom and looking at big old global data about, is our district doing better or worse? And that's one thing, but at the end of the day, how are we going to get better? What are we going to do about it? And at the end of the day, that means we have to narrow down to individual students.
Brian, does every staff member has access to their particular
Right now,
classroom?
I'm telling you
or-
that we now have a system that will allow us to do it. So Dawn's office created this for us to make sure that
Okay.
it works. I'm saying to you, it works, and we now have the ability to provide this to our principals and to our teachers.
Okay,
Our focus has been on getting our administrative reports built and up and running first.
okay.
So,
And
right now, we have
verifying
not
that we-
targeted teacher reports at this point, but we have the capability and the licensing to do that.
Okay, so the capability is there in the future for us to do that.
Very impressive.
And the information is going straight from iReady into this? I mean, or you're having to input that?
It's
I mean, are
being
they
input,
compatible?
uploaded. And so we upload it into Campus most of the time, and then there's an overnight, it updates from Infinite Campus, our SIS.
But it's pretty
The
real
teachers are
time.
inputting.
Yes.
I mean,
It's real time for Infinite Campus, like iReady, we will wait till the end of the window. And as soon as the end of the testing window ends, it takes about a day or two to get the data, make sure the data's clean, and then we upload it, and then it will be in there. So
Okay.
it's not overnight, because we want to get it clean before we do it.
but it's
it
not,
is-
it's not 6 months ago.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
It's at the end of the window, we need roughly 2 working days, and then it will reflect.
But you're talking about giving an assessment within the same week, having the data on your students, exactly what they
Yeah.
can and can't do.
Great.
Yeah. Would you go to the, let me just show a couple more behaviors.
Yeah,
Back up to the behavior chart.
Brian, once we get to where teachers can view this information and break it down and they can see, okay, so-and-so needs help with this and this, do we have resources available for them to go and come up with a plan on how to get that, to meet that child where they are and get them where they need to go?
So I will say it's a perfect system, but here's the beauty of it. The resources that you've been purchasing, for example, the ELA resources, the companies that design those resources now, they know that this is an issue in our classrooms today, that we have students, the bell curve looks a lot different now. And so when you go through and you look at teacher resources, they show you activities and they have intervention models built within the resource that teachers can use. Some use them, some design their own. One of the models that we use that is intentional for this reason is guided reading. Guided reading, it is actually built for this very thing because you have a group of 4 kids, you're designing instruction, and the resources we're providing now provide different levels of activities for
Okay,
those students.
so there's ideas available.
There are ideas. I will say this, though, if we have teachers in the room. Teaching is difficult. You don't just open up a book and say, well, this group is low, do this, and this
Right.
group, and I'll do this. But the resources are there. It just takes time to get through them. It takes time to use them, but the resources are far better today than that they were 10 years ago for providing intervention models. Yeah. So behavior, make sure that one. So you know that one of our goals is to reduce the behavior incidences, you know what I mean, in our buildings. And so this chart here, this is another example of what you can do. So what this chart would show, if it comes up,
Yeah, it's,
dragon.
Joe's looking in the sky like there's gremlins causing this.
It's just taking a minute, I'm not sure. Normally that's,
So when it comes up, it shows you, it'll show you some very cool graphics as in terms of the event types, why kids are being sent to the office, what the resolution is, what we're doing with those students. It gets down to specifically what month are the most behaviors happening. It gets down to what day of the week are you seeing those behaviors. It gets down to the time of day that you're seeing those behaviors. So in this example, you could go into, if you were East Elementary, you could go into East Elementary. You could look at very specifically 3rd grade. If you know that there are a lot of 3rd graders coming to your office, you could get in and look and say, so what time of the day, what day of the week are our 3rd graders struggling? And then literally they have the ability to look and identify, so who are those students, what time of the day that they're struggling? Because maybe you'll find out that it's 3rd graders during recess or 4th graders during PE time. You literally have the ability to drill down specifically about when is this happening in our building? Because if you know that, you're now empowered to do something different, to change something. If you know it's during passing time at the middle school, then you have the ability to impact that. So I'm saying is that not going to come up?
we think it's hitting the same access point maybe.
Okay.
That's
What
straight
about,
away.
will I hit the will do the attendance one? Do you know attendance is also a one of the areas that we're looking at? if it'll come up. It will do the same thing. Your school has the ability to, it's not going to show you the cool charts, but you can see the topics. You literally have the ability to go in by teacher and say, in my classroom, is it the boys, is it the girls, is it the IP students, the non-IP students, is it the kids on free and reduced lunch? Not. You literally can drill down and get specific, and that's important because, again, if a school can identify, which they already always could, this just makes it easier, identify the students that are struggling, you have the ability to impact, make those phone calls home, have conversations, what can we do to help, and start making a difference. So I guess what I wanted to say is that we now, Tableau, what it's doing for us is empowering us to get down to the student level where we can make a difference. And that's something that we've been needing to do for a long time, instead of looking at global data. So we're excited about it.
I think it's awesome. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Have we talked about how we might roll out in terms of professional development and our training on how to,
We've now, so far what we've done is shown principals what the capacity is, what it's capable of doing. But again,
Okay.
we want to make sure that this really works. And obviously, it wasn't a good example tonight, but it didn't.
Yeah.
It works.
yeah.
It works.
We should
And-
hardwired.
Yeah, and so what we have to do now is we have to have conversations with building principals about, because we also have to be careful that we are making sure that the right data is going to the right people. What we don't want
Right.
to do is just sharing bulk data. We do with principals. We'd be very careful to do that with teachers, because we want to make sure they have the data they need and not everybody else's data. So that's going to take us some time fine tuning, but once we get that figured out, then we start having conversations with building principals to say, when you get teachers around the table, let's start showing them how they can access these reports. And use them.
Clearly a powerful tool, but it can also be overwhelming, I
It
would
will,
imagine,
yes.
because, if you got so much information. So being able to give them, some targeted, here are the things that you may want to look at for your classroom and keep it a manageable size of.
And we have to, and that's why we've taken some time, because we're trying to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
And I know it looked a little cumbersome here tonight because it wasn't coming out, but I can tell you that in working, just using it, in the amount of time that I've been using it, when you get to know it, it works really well.
Yeah.
It does.
You know, Ryan, I've worked in a couple different offices that use this particular platform, and like you mentioned, it's really powerful. You can do a lot of analysis with it. It's a pretty flexible tool. But just a quick commentary. You guys are really to be commended on this, because Dawn knows that this was something that the district has been talking about for 5, 6, 7 years. Maybe a little longer than that. It's been a long road, and there's some setbacks along the way with providers and vendors and data warehouses and all kinds of stuff. And so it's really, okay, I don't know, it sounds goofy to say, but it's really cool to see that we're actually getting to a place where you guys are going to have a usable tool to crunch the numbers and to be able to provide some assistance for yourselves and with the staff. I think that's really great stuff. So appreciate the work.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Anything else? Any questions for Dr. Schindler? All right.
Thank you. And thank you to Dawn and her office. They're the ones who invested the time.
Thank you,
Thank you, Dawn,
in
in your office. Doing an awesome job.
Yes.
Sorry your live streaming messed you up.
I blame Joe.
Yeah,
There you go.
IT guy always gets blamed.
All right.
Just need to get him a shirt.
Jason Hoffman is up next.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Talk a little bit about the start of school. Let's talk about buses and transportation. As you know, we switched our start times, which meant completely rerouting every student in the district. It was, I have to say, a little bumpy at the start. And so running 2 tiers, having all the elementary schools go first. It's important that they get their routes done and get at the secondary schools on time. We've made quite a few tweaks. For example, at Callaway Hills, we have 55 minutes from the time they dismiss. The morning is going pretty well. It's the afternoons where we have that crunch. So the elementary routes have to run their route and be at their secondary stops when they dismiss. And so we started with 3 buses at Callaway Hills, and remember, that's our smallest elementary school, but it's so rural. Our 3 buses were having a hard time getting to the secondary schools, so we added a 4th bus. And 2 of them started getting there on time, but we still had 2 that weren't getting there on time. And as we looked at it, one bus had one student that to get to their house, they had to drive 10 minutes up a lane and then 10 minutes back a lane. So that one student added 20 minutes to that bus, and it was getting there late. We had another bus that had the exact same scenario. So we added a 5th bus at Callaway Hills that now has 2 students on it. but it was a bus that was free. It wasn't running an A route, so it's not free. It was available, sorry.
Good clarification.
So we were able to add it for
Important
minimal
one.
cost to run those 2 students, and now we have all 5 buses getting where they need to be. Another major change that we had, we were trying to send all the buses to both high schools and then have all the buses leave and get to both middle schools. And it was taking too long to load all the buses, and it was then also taking too long for them, just the logistics of having 24 buses at Capital City High School and 27 buses at Jefferson City High School. By the time it takes for the first bus to leave to the last bus to leave was about 6 minutes. So we made a switch last Monday, and we now have half the buses going to each high school. We have the other half going straight to the middle schools. Students are, when the middle school is dismissed, the students that are on the buses that are there, and they know which ones are there each day, they leave and go right onto those buses. They hold the other ones back. The kids that are at the high schools, they load the buses they're going to ride home, but then the kids whose buses are at the middle schools, they just get on any one of those buses. We then take them to the middle schools and they transfer, the other ones come out, and it's not perfect, but it's certainly got a lot better. We're now getting, the buses are leaving out of there by about 4:05 now. So it's pretty close to what we were doing at Simonson before. So if we're going to continue to do transfers, it's just going to take a while. So we're still tweaking and trying to get better every day. We're getting our buses to the secondary schools on time now. So I think it's gotten a lot better. Any questions on buses?
I have so many.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, so at the high school, we are loading kids on, just get on a bus, get on any bus you want.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really know if you're on bus 2 or bus 16 or bus 27. So if one of the, I guess my concern is, if I don't know what bus my kid's on, and somewhere between the high school and the middle school, there's an accident, we don't know where that kid is.
And that we did the exact same thing. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we did
Yeah.
the exact same thing the last 15 years with middle schoolers coming to Simonson. So that isn't,
Okay, so this is not new.
and it's now with high schoolers instead of middle schoolers at least.
We're hoping a little more responsible. Doesn't always guarantee it,
Okay.
in my house anyway, but you're hoping.
So what are the middle schools saying? What's the feedback?
From what I'm hearing, they think it's better. You know, our staff are on contract. Gary, they're on contract till 4:05, is that 4:10? So the first few days, they were
Yeah.
watching kids till after their contract time. And so if we're dismissing, if buses are leaving the lots at 4:05, it takes time from the kids to leave their classroom, get to load the buses, so they're leaving before around 4 probably. So there's a little bit of time still. I mean, there's another thing we could do, and we don't really have space for it, but it would be to have those students dismissed to a central location and supervise them somewhere, but I don't know where that would be. It seems, the consensus is for 10 minutes, it's safer just to keep them in their classroom until it's time to dismiss them.
Jason, have we addressed the question, and I know we had a question, a copy with Larry, from a parent about their child like being picked up first and then dropped off last. Have we worked on any of those scenarios where,
That's pretty much typical of any bus route. Even when I was riding the bus, if you were picked up first, you were dropped off last. It's just a matter of logistics, where the school is, where you're going.
So-
If you did it the other way, you would take the whole bus of kids
To the furthest
full length of
point.
the route, and then start working backwards. And that you would start dropping off closest and picking up furthest away. So just limit yourself first on, last on.
okay,
And it's the same way in the morning. You're gonna come from the furthest out and come in.
all right. So that scenario is gonna be, I mean, it is what it is then for those
It's been like
students.
that for a while. I know with my kids.
We did address her other concern also.
Okay, I was just curious whether just wondered how we responded to those.
Mhm.
Any other questions about busing?
I mean, are we still, what does the expense look like now at this point? Have you had a chance to reevaluate? Because this was, I mean, we were doing this tiered system new,
No, we've always done tiered.
well,
So I think one of the big issues is we were late to our elementary schools before, but we were impacting a much smaller number of people. So if we had our 3:30 schools at Thorpe Gordon, where we only have 250 bus riders, if we're late for there, we're late for a small number of teachers. I think that was, and people had just been used to it. We had done that forever. So the tiering isn't different. It is, we've done 2 tiers since before I got here.
But it does have a
the
possible
larger
more
impact.
ripple effect.
Right.
If there is a delay, then it has a greater impact on more.
Absolutely.
And that's not making an excuse, but it does impact more.
Well, let's continue to get better.
Right.
I mean, every day.
Right. So on the facility side, we had our OSIP reps, the construction insurance folks. They were in town today. Took them through Capital City High School, Jefferson City High School, showing them how we're working with construction and still having students in the building, and they were very pleased with. They had their safety person with us as well. So great report back from them about how a great job of keeping students and construction separate. So I think that's going really well and getting really close to the finish line. Anything else from me?
Anything else from you?
Nope.
Any other questions for Jason? Okay.
Thanks.
Keep working
Thank you,
on that
Jason.
busing. Dr. Lynn?
Just a couple things. One, behind Stacy, if we could all look at Stacy here, our JC schools and our logo. So, our school district, our official name is Jefferson City School District. We didn't change our name. We've always been Jefferson City School District. We did, years ago, start calling ourselves Jefferson City Public Schools. And so we just went back to what our official name is. So no, we didn't change our name. We're just going by our official name. We talking with Ryan and her folks, and they did a great job in working with Tisha Spencer of something that we wanted something that was timeless. We wanted something that was were recognizable across the state, and something that was inspiring. So I think with the seal and what those things stand for, we're excited about that. So our district website, which I'll touch on here in a second, it's jcschools.us. So that's kind of for short. Instead of JCPS, JC Schools. That's what, we're not changing that, so it's just kind of short. So we are the Jefferson City School District. We've got the red and the blue representing our 2 high schools, but we are super excited about that. We did have our staff photo on our opening day. You can see the last 4 years. We do not have it up here yet. Our most recent of JC 1838. We were established in 1838, and we share with our staff that we're going to throughout this year. What does that mean to them, and the traditions that we have, and what that means for a better tomorrow of giving hope of our district mission. So we will slide each of these down, and then we'll put the most recent one here as in the hall, and then it goes up the stairs as well. So we are excited about that, all based upon that we are stronger together, our staff, and taking a picture. I've shared before, as you can see above Shelby's head there with the JC, was my first year here, and folks said you can't do a staff photo with 1,489 employees, like herding cats. So you can kind of see the J's a little bit heavy there in the tail, because that's where everybody walked, because they just kind of, that's where they ended up. So great job to our folks on, and Chad Reisner and some other folks at the high school at Jefferson City High School, getting the, I'm struggling with that because I've always just called it the high school. So we have Jefferson City High School, we have Capital City High School. So at Jefferson City High School, as far as the outlining of JC 1838. So we'll get that up there soon. If we would go to our district website. So this is our new website. It's at jcschools.us. I had asked Ryan, when she's starting out on this, we wanted something that was inspiring, easy to use, and informational. So I wanted Rosalie Linthicum to be able to look at that, that's my mother, and find things. And so anyway, we've got a lot of graphics on there, a lot of our students, which is always a great thing. You can't go wrong when you're showcasing what we're all about, and that's our students. So I encourage you to take a look as we are working through that. So at your leisure, we encourage folks to use that as a tool, not just have something neat to look at, but to use that.
It is so much easier to use,
Good,
so much easier.
awesome.
Agreed. I like having the activities on our website too, not in a different website.
Absolutely. So we wanted to have it, if they did happen to have a contest in the state of Missouri for the top school website, that we would win. So they have not done that, but I think we'd be in the running. So that's our goal, and everything we do, raise the bar, so we're excited about that. We started school, our enrollment is up 46 students from last year. We started rounding. We had the first community-wide coffee of this school year a week ago Friday. We had that at the Miller Center. We took that concept to our buildings and meeting with our staff. So rounding is by entering a teacher's environment, we establish contact, which develops a sense of commitment and community. With this comes trust and access to vital information. So we've gone to Thorpe, JC High School, and Callaway Hills this year. We asked 4 questions. We put large Post-it notes, and we allow them to put them on small Post-its, and they can put their questions. And the 4 questions are: what's going well? So they put that on a Post-it. What do you need help with, either in the building or the district? What questions do you have for the superintendent? And 4th, what change would you make if you were superintendent? So we go through every single question, and then we will have something in writing back to not only the staff members that are there. It's not required for the staff, but many or most of the folks are there. We'll send something back in writing to their entire building with regards to all those questions. So we want to create that we truly are stronger together at the building level with our teachers, because that's where the rubber meets the road. So we're excited about that. We had facilities focus group. We touched on that last time, evaluating our K through 8 space options. So as I've shared before, I got here in 15, and we had overcrowding at our K through 12, and we addressed the 9 through 12 with the opening of Capital City High School and renovating Jefferson City High School, and looking at the K through 8. So right now exploring a 5-6 option of other 5-6 schools in the state. There are 22 of them, and we're looking at what's working, what's not, what would they do differently to consider those options. So we're looking at that. We'll continue to meet. I believe we have met 8 times, and we will give you an update, a little more detail next month as we meet or looking at those options. Athletic facilities focus group. We met to consider phase 2 considerations at Jefferson City High School and Capital City High School. As most folks know, we have practice facilities at Capital City High School. We will have competition facilities for tennis, but we do have phase 2 plans to then have at some time competition facilities for all outdoor sports at Capital City High School. With that being said, we want all students, whether you go to JC or Capital City, to have the same opportunity. So we have some phase 2 plans that we are considering, and that we want to look and see what those plans might be and what it might look like at Jefferson City High School. I will say here of fall sports, the participation in fall sports compared to last year is up 43% this year. So we are super excited about that. That was one of our, throughout the campaign, we wanted to give more students an opportunity to reach their potential and to participate. And so we are super excited about that with Capital City. Question or? No. Okay, good.
Great.
With the Helias Foundation Golf Tournament, which was a week ago today, I participated in that, and that was a good day. We got second overall, but you know, the thing in golf terms, the key is to partner with people that are really good golfers. So I was kind of the plow that drug us down a little bit. And last, I'll touch on the YMCA, which we are excited to partner with them with regards to, they have offered for all district-wide 8th graders a free membership. They're wanting a wellness program with regards to our students and community-wide. And Craig Lammers told me today that there are 18 students right now from TJ and Lewis and Clark that are signed up for that. So They hope to increase that, but that's the initial number. I think overall they have 42 students, but 18 of them are from TJ&LC. So we hope to increase that, but that's a step in the right direction, 18 more than we potentially had last year, so that's a positive. Any questions for me on any of this or anything else?
Questions, Larry? Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right, now we're going to move to old business. And we're going to review policy BBF-RI. We approved this policy, I believe, in May. Ken wants to review the policy.
In June, at our regular meeting on June 10th, the board unanimously adopted a social media policy, BBF1, and it included some provisions for us to follow as board members. Policy committee, I'd like to personally or publicly ask that every member of the board, they were formulated after a great deal of discussion among the policy committee as well as members of the board. They incorporated some well-established best practices, and specifically in one of the sections, in section 2, it talks about maintaining social media accounts and profiles as board members that are separate from our personal and family accounts. I think it's important to remember that each of us is representative of the board as a whole, and the policy doesn't reflect any restrictions on using social media to communicate with constituents or the public, and it doesn't imply any control over what we do as individual members of the community or parents. It does reflect some responsibility that we have to each other as individual members, and the policy is intended to help draw between our role and so our social media presence reflects our individual interests, and I think each of us has family members and that we're going to be obviously posting and appropriately posting things on social media about our individual family members. But for those people who don't know us and the general public, they see that. I think it's easy for them to misinterpret that we are biased or preferential for one or two schools, and I think that that's part of the reason that this policy was put in place. It reflects best practices, and there's no more, I think, blatant exposure that we have as a board than to have a policy and not follow it. And so I'm just publicly coming to ask that we, as board members, follow the policy that was adopted.
And I just want to ask if any board member has a concern with this policy, then we need to bring that out and put it back to the policy committee and change it. Because we're not going to have a policy we don't follow. Right. For you to speak up as board members to say I have concerns, we need to change the policy, otherwise we need to. Okay? Anyone want to voice any concerns? Policies that we need to adopt. Go with policy AC.
Yeah, our policy committee met a couple of weeks ago, and we have two policies that the first one is policy AC. It is specifically came down from MSBA regarding compliance with the U.S. Department of Agricultural requirements. It relates to prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and retaliation in regards to some of the policies that come under the Education, Food, and Nutrition Services Department. And so we reviewed this with administrators. We're complying. There are some time-sensitive elements to it, and so policy committee voted to bring this tonight with to entertain the motion that we waive the second reading and adopt this policy and make it effective immediately. Requires no change in our administrative procedures.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
All right, and the second one would be in regards to discipline policy, JGR1. And Dr. Schindorf, you want to speak to this? You came to us with some administrative procedures that needed to be modified, and
So you may recall, you updated the policy back, I believe, in May or June. It was updated, but then our job was then to take the updated policy and to revise the code of conduct. Remember, code of conduct is an administrative procedure that is supposed to be guided by this policy. When we went to principals and began talking about the code of conduct, there were some concerns that they had with the removal of some items, and they asked if we could make a couple of changes. And so there were 3 changes, and here they are. Under the new policy that we approved, under the sale, purchase, transfer, or distribution of any prescription drugs, alcohol, narcotic substances, unauthorized inhalants, controlled substances, illegal drugs, there was only, remember, in all of our consequences, there's always a first offense and a second offense. This one we had 1, and that was if you were caught, first offense, you were expelled from school. That's it. The principal just said it may very well be that we need to expel students from school if they're caught selling certain drugs, but they would like a little more flexibility. And so we went back to MSBA and asked if it was possible to put in a first offense and subsequent, with first offense still giving the option of expulsion, but giving other options as well. For example, an out-of-school suspension or a conference with the discipline officer, that type of thing. And then with the subsequent offense, again, out-of-school suspension or an expulsion. So we're not removing the option of expulsion. We're simply saying we want to give the principals more flexibility when students are caught. Again, it may be that a student's caught selling a certain drug and they're going to refer them for an expulsion. That may still happen, but we just wanted more flexibility. So that's the first one. The second one that they had a concern with is in the new policy. The language of physical contact or aggression was removed. And so we either have fighting or assault. And so what the principal said is oftentimes there are things that happen in our hallways that we wouldn't consider to be a fight because it wasn't a mutual, they weren't fighting, and it really wouldn't be called an assault. You're walking down the hall and you're goofing around with your friend and you bump them into the locker and that kind of stuff. So they wanted physical contact or aggression put back in so that they didn't have to tag kids with assault on the discipline record. Contacted MSBA and they said absolutely that would be, they gave us a definition of physical contact or aggression to be unwanted physical contact with or without aggression that does not rise to the level of an assault. And so principals would have the flexibility then of flagging a student's record with physical contact as opposed to an assault if it wasn't an assault. They felt that was an appropriate thing to ask for. MSBA agreed that it would not be inappropriate. And then the third thing was on the code of conduct, there were a lot of times when elementary principals used the term loss of privilege. Nowhere in policy JGR does it say that we would use loss of privilege as a consequence. When I contacted the attorneys at MSBA and asked them if we would still be okay to use a loss of privilege at the school level, even though our policy didn't use that language, of course she said, no, we can't do something that your policy doesn't say. So she said rather than put loss of privilege in every single one of the offenses, she gave us a blurb to put at the end of our policy that says this. In addition to the above consequences, building administration may, when deemed necessary, utilize alternative consequences with supervisor approval. She said as long as we had that statement in policy JGR, then principals would be allowed to use loss of privilege. So those are the 3 recommendations to go back and change in our policy.
so the policy committee, again, given that these are things that are time sensitive and we want to be compliant with our policies, that we would propose and entertain a motion to waive the second reading and adopt these currently.
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Steve?
I've got some fairly significant concerns whenever it comes to the sale, purchase, transfer, or distribution of any prescription drug, alcohol, narcotic substance, unauthorized inhalants, controlled substances, illegal drugs, counterfeit drugs, imitation controlled substances, or drug-related paraphernalia. Here's my worry is can we imagine an instance that going forward when a student would would behave in that way on campus or within 2,000 feet of our campus? Can we imagine a set of circumstances where we would do something other than suspend that student or potentially, expel that student?
That's very possible. All the principals are saying is that under the old, under the current definition, there is simply no choice. There is no out-of-school suspension. There is no,
Right.
I'm going to send you home for 10 days and we're going to, get you some counseling or we're going to work with you. It is basically,
Sure.
you're gone. And they just had concerns with that being the only option. It
I
may
can
still be
appreciate
what's
that.
necessary.
Yeah, I could appreciate the interest in wanting to have some flexibility to work with students. My worry, though, is that, it's what message are we, what are we trying to accomplish, and what message are we sending to the public? And I mean, this, I had to go back to my old days in law enforcement and look at the criminal code. So if you do any of those things within 2,000 feet of a school building, then it's a Class A felony in the state of Missouri. So it's handled, in the adult system, it's handled the same as first-degree murder. I mean, you face the same kind of penalties. So my concern is that given the gravity of those offenses, given the weight that the law says if you are 17 or older and you do this, then, this is, you basically under state law, you can't do anything worse than this. I mean, we can't give you, this is, you're eligible for the worst penalty that we can hand out, or I guess next to the worst. My worry is that while well-intentioned, that we want to provide some flexibility with the principals and be able to say, okay, if we have a child, if we have a student that is drug involved, I mean, I worked with the juvenile drug court program for several years. I totally understand and support the option of being able to, the opportunity to give that child an option of saying, hey, we need to give some treatment to you. You need to get enrolled in a program. You need to be able to get yourself clean. You need to be able to do X, Y, or Z in order to be able to return to school. But my concern is that I think what the message that we give is, hey, it can start with ISS, or it can start with 1 to 180 days out of school suspension, or it can go to expulsion. And to me, I have trouble aligning what happens if we've got a lot of kids that are within a year of becoming adults, right? And both high schools, well, one high school for now, next year, a couple of years will be that in both buildings. And I don't know that there's a connection there. I worry that the message that the public will pick up is, hey, if you sell drugs in Jefferson City schools and you do it on campus, then there's a possibility that you will get something less than an expulsion or a significant suspension. And so I'm not opposed to the flexibility, but what I would much rather see is some articulated language, something more specific that says, take the ISS off the table for one, and then work with the number of days of suspension or something, and work some kind of therapeutic language in there or something that says, hey, if you do this, then here's a range of options that the principals can avail themselves of.
So let me just respond. So remember that in the policy, there is always a very wide band of options.
Right.
When you look
Absolutely.
at our code of conduct, rarely does our code of conduct, well, sometimes it does, it'll say 1 to 180, but a lot of times what we did in the code of conduct is we went in and specified it. If a student's in a fight, they get X number of days. We
Right.
list that in the code of conduct, and that's what the principals would follow. So in code of conduct, even if you decide to vote this in policies here, code of conduct would likely not say, and school suspension is not going to be an option in the code of conduct. So a suspension, it could say 10-day suspension with hearing, or it could say, or expulsion. We have the ability in code of conduct to do that. Policy is always very broad like this with all.
And we did run these proposals past MSBA,
We
and they concurred that from a legal perspective, they were solid.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the legal perspective. I assume you probably did that. Do we know what surrounding buildings do, surrounding districts? Like, have we looked at what happens if a kid does this at Elias or Trinity, or, lots of folks like to compare us to Blair Oaks. Do we know what happens in Blair
I
Oaks?
don't know that that's a
Rule,
good
you can't
comparison.
compare us to Elias.
Well, I-
They do
You
pick.
don't have to tell me that, but I mean, it happens all the time. And so I'd be curious to know, especially folks that are in the same area that we're in, what are they doing? I mean, Columbia Public Schools, do they have something similar? I mean, did we do that analysis?
I don't know that we did. I think, again, we rely on MSBA to guide us and to give us
And our
good
principals,
counsel.
our principals asked us
And
to do
again, our
this
staff, I think that
Right.
giving
so that they could have
giving the
flexibility.
people on the front lines the opportunity to have some discretion, I think is,
I think that the way you described it is, I think our principal would probably say yes. If someone brought illegal drugs, if they had narcotics and they were selling them, absolutely expulsion may be very appropriate. But they also looked at, you could, in theory, suppose that a fifth grader could bring alcohol to school and sell it to somebody, and he would be expelled from school. And I think that's the kind of stuff that concerned him.
Or a child who was trying to sell a substance that he called a drug that really wasn't
Flour
an
in a
illegal
bag,
drug.
playing
And there,
around.
he's expelled. And that happened to a friend of mine.
Sure, and, you know, I think in some cases, I think you have to take a very clear stand and you have to say, you know what, if you behave this way in our school district, then this is what can very well happen to you. And I think this opens the door to something other than that. And not that I have any concerns about folks utilizing good judgment, but we are all human. And my concern is again, the perception that we're giving to the community in terms of what is permissible, how we may handle something. And I think in some areas, you know, discretion is fine, but in some areas, I think you have to be very clear and you have to say, you know what, it's not a question of whether or not you know how to use that discretion appropriately. It's a question, it's more of a question or an issue about what the community norms are, what the community has an expectation of. And that's why I asked the question, did we ask and see what our neighbors are doing and what the general perspective of this is? I understand MSBA said, yes, it's legally sound, and I trust those attorneys. I know all of them personally, but my concern is that I don't think this is in a shape that probably meets our needs going forward. I think it would be good to be able to provide folks some leeway to be able to help students that are in a really bad way, that do some very unfortunate things. I mean, we've all known kids that have made some bad decisions, but at this point, I'm really not comfortable waiving a second reading without a little more diligence on this. I'd very much like to know what the rest of the school community is doing, at least locally, to know. I mean, we can't say whether this sets us outside the bounds or if this puts us right in line with everybody else. I think that's an important question we should be able to answer.
I can just speak from my experience as a building administrator in the last 2 years serving in my career. When you get those outliers, those real severe cases, if a student is selling a drug, they're not going to get ISS. That might be in there to cover maybe younger kids. I don't know. It's like Dr. Schindler said, there's a wide range. But so it would be 10 days in a discipline hearing, and that's where Mr. Deegan and I, our discipline hearing officer, would get together.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times where we talk across buildings, we talk across districts, and we do reach out and say, hey, you know, you might call 2 or 3 different districts similar to you or nearby you and say, hey, when you all have this, what do you do? So it's not that it's not done, but when it's done, it's usually for more severe discipline infractions.
Sure, I can appreciate that.
And I don't think any of our
Thanks, Gary.
principals would have any issues if we struck ISS from that, if that was the board's liking. I don't think any principal would have an issue with the striking. I don't think any principal, if we had a child selling drugs
Right.
on school property, would want them in an in-school suspension still on property. So I doubt it's ever going to get used, so.
And that's kind of my point is,
Are you comfortable with it if we just strike ISS?
Well,
Or are you not comfortable with the rest of it?
I definitely think ISS should be struck, but I like Gary's comments just a moment ago. To me, it would seem to be really appropriate that at a minimum, in my mind, is you strike ISS and you say, if you're having a manifestation, I don't know if they're still called that, or a hearing, an administrative hearing, to determine, okay, hey, has the 10 days been enough, or do we need longer than that? To me, I think if we have a student that is committing a Class A felony under the criminal code, and the juvenile court looks at it the very same way in terms of seriousness, then I would think that we would want to react at least minimally. We would say, we need to hit the pause button for this student. And you have to remember, I mean, it's not, we're not in business to be able to save one child. We're in the business to be able to save and work with 8,800. And I think whenever you behave this way, you lose the privilege, or at least temporarily, you should lose the privilege of being able to be around your peers, being able to be in a regular classroom, to be able to go and walk the halls and do the things that you used to do. And so to me, I think it's minimally appropriate that you strike ISS and say, at least a 10-day suspension, and then you go from there.
Isn't that covered? We're just talking about the policy. All of that's covered in the
Not the code of-
procedure part of it.
Code of conduct.
Right.
Which is completely separate from what the board's responsible
No,
for.
and I understand what you're
We are
saying.
responsible for setting the
Sure.
policy, and we're gonna let them in their buildings
Right.
set the
Which
procedure.
we-
It's not our job.
Which- and we'll
And what
convey
I'm
with you
suggesting-
those code of conduct.
Yeah.
The code of conduct is.
What I'm
It's not-
suggesting is that to me, this is very, very broad. And so we're giving the leeway, but it's so broad that you can drive a truck through it. And,
I disagree.
and so,
So you're afraid that one of our principals is gonna give a kid ISS because he's tried to sell drugs inside the school?
it's in policy. It says you
I
can.
asked you a question.
No,
It's in policy and it says you can.
I asked you a question.
My concern is that it's in policy and it says that you can. My concern is not that we're going to have a staff member do it. My concern is that it's in policy and it says that you can. Uh, 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 What did you say earlier? We're not going to have a policy if we don't follow it? I mean,
and we would.
and this is in
We would.
policy.
This
And it
also allows the
says,
principal
it says
to expel
ISS, beginning ISS, 1 to 188 days out of school suspension or expulsion. And so that
he
that
said
was.
the
option of all of
So my
those.
original question was, hey, can we ever imagine a circumstance where you would not, respond significantly to a student that does that? I mean,
I think you have to read the whole thing. I mean, there's
Yeah.
even a piece in here that talks about unauthorized inhalants. Well, unauthorized inhalants are
Yeah.
whipped cream and, anything that.
Sure.
So an elementary student, they can use for huffing or things like that.
Right.
So that kid who sees a YouTube video and sticks a thing of whipped cream in his backpack, you're not gonna give a fifth grader 10
Expulsion.
days of out-of-school suspension.
I
Like,
would hope
So that's
not.
why your policy is broad, because we need things to be gray enough to where our administrators have the ability to make a decision on their own. I think that's why policies are written that way, and why we have procedures in to back them up.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with what you're driving at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. My worry is that the general public, that when they hear this or they see it, they don't think that way. They think, okay, you know what? JC School District says if you sell drugs on campus or if you transfer or distribute drugs on campus, then the minimum punishment that you can get is now in-school suspension. And
That's a,
and that's
well,
and that's
an
my concern.
uninformed, that would be an uninformed conclusion that someone in the general public would draw.
Well, we all know
And-
everybody's always informed. I mean,
Well, but I don't think we can be reactionary based on, a potential misunderstanding or misinformation that somebody draws. I don't know. We have a
I have a motion and I have a second.
second
And
way.
if people do agree with you and they can vote against it, and if they don't, then I have a
Is the-
motion and a second.
Is the motion in the second after Dr. Schindorf said to remove ISS?
No, the
No.
motion is to accept the policy as it's written. That's what Scott moved, to approve the policy as written. Do you wish to amend your motion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
nah.
Nay. Good discussion. We're glad we have discussions like this. Okay, I just lost my agenda. So,
Individuals with disabilities.
Bridget Frank.
Thank you. So each year, we're asked to adopt a local compliance plan, which ensures that we're following state and federal regulations for educating students with disabilities. So I apologize, there are a lot of documents, and I'll try to summarize them to make sense. So basically, the state publishes their recommended local compliance plan each year, and then as a district, we have the option A, to adopt that local compliance plan as is, which is what most districts do and what I'm recommending that we do tonight. We have option B or C, which is basically tweak the plan or write our own. Either way, it has to be approved by the state and also meet the state and federal regulations. So there are, in your documents, you have the entire local compliance plan, which is 117 pages, if you ever really want to read it, to see all the policies and procedures that we follow for special education services. You also have a more condensed version that has a summary of the changes, of what the changes were from last year to this year. So there are significant changes to our eligibility requirements for speech and language. So that is how we identify a student in need of speech and language services. So we're one of only 2 states in the nation that use a discrepancy model to identify speech and language. And so this new model asks that we use more of a response to intervention model, which is basically taking into account how a student responds to some minimal interventions prior to them needing special education services. So that will be a substantial change for our students and our families and our staff members. It is more student focused, but it is some logistics on how to collect that data and analyze that data. We're prepared to go forward with those changes, but it will be different for our families and our staff members. So that's the major changes within the document. There are some minor changes about para-training, how we utilize Missouri School for the severely disabled, some vision changing as well. But for the most part, the other changes are a little bit more minimal and some wording changes. So what I'm asking is really that we again adopt the recommended local compliance plan that is recommended by the state as is, and we adapt to the new changes that they're recommending.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank
We'll look at
you.
somebody's
Thank you,
agenda.
Bridget.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bridget.
Thanks, Bridget.
Your adjournment. Thank you. Last time. Can't get it back. Okay, so we are down to future dates. The staff barbecue is
Check
this
my phone.
Friday.
Put my shit.
Many of us are helping with that. The foundation gala is on Tuesday. MSBA annual conference is next weekend. I think several of us are attending that. Coffee with Larry on October 4th. You can read the rest. I assume we can read them. So we can read all the way through to our grand opening of our new Jefferson City High School and our Capital City High School on January the 12th. Someone want to make the motion to go into close?
Motion to suspend open to enter into the closed meeting by roll call vote pursuant to Chapter 610.021 of the revised statutes of Missouri, Sections 1, legal actions, 2, leasing, purchase, or sale of real estate, 3, hiring, firing, disciplining, 13, individually identifiable personnel records, and 14, records which are protected from disclosure by law.
Need a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote, Stephanie?
Let's see, yes.
Yes, please.
Lori?
Yes.
Lorelei?
Yes?
Ken?
Yes.
Steve?
Yep.
All right, we will take a 5-minute break and then we will